So the title of Chris and my talk is about consumer and community involvement and why it is an essential ingredient, not just the icing on the cake. And I think the words in the room this morning are testament to that. So we'll just start with a couple of definitions. It's a consumer. So a consumer is a person who has a lived experience such as MS of a particular disease or condition. Community is though people who have a common interest in a particular disease or condition, such as service providers and researchers, and stakeholders are funders or policy makers and donors. So what is consumer and community involvement in research? So it's about consumers working in partnership to make decisions about research priorities, policy and practice. Community members are part of a process rather than being invited to observe, comment on the research. And it is about conducting research that is with the community rather than doing research to or for the community. Right, now we can talk about the consumer and community involvement pyramid, and there are different levels in that pyramid. So if we start off with informing, so informing is things such as websites, newsletters, symposium, events such as this where you're learning about research. The next level up is consulting, and that's where we're having a two-way conversation with the researchers and consumers, and they'll include things such as focus groups. An example of that would be the development of online resources through the flagship. The next level is at the involving level. An example of that would be the magnetic brain stimulation for MS, where we had consumers involved in that throughout that trial, as Bruce mentioned, in the development of patient information sheets, consent forms, advertising material, flyers, and actually reviewing the feasibility of that trial. The next level is partnership. An example of that is the development of the Understanding MOOC, or the Massive Open Online Course, where consumers were involved in that right throughout that process, from the very design stage to actually informing what that course would look like, the content, the mode of delivery, and appearing in some of the lived experience video presentations throughout it. At the very top of the pyramid is consumer-led research, and we heard a little bit about that this morning, where we're going to start seeing chief investigators on some of the research grants, and we also have consumers on steering committees. So if we look at the regulatory framework about consumer and community involvement in Australia, we have the 1992 National Health and Medical Research Council Act. In 2016, the National Health and Medical Research developed a statement on consumer and community involvement in research, and that's currently under review to bring that statement in line with more contemporary practice and thinking about consumer and community involvement. And the recently released Medical Research Future Fund Principles for Consumer Involvement in Research, and they were only released in March this year, and they state that They state that the different perspectives and lived experiences that consumers bring to research improves its quality, relevance and impact. And I think that's absolutely true, and that was demonstrated this morning. The principles specifically developed by a consumer advisory group to the MRFF state that consumers should be involved in every type of research, so that's from the lab right through to the clinic, at all stages of research, in partnership with researchers, effectively, sensitively and safely, and with broad diversity and equity. So now I'm going to hand over to Chris, and she's going to give some examples of consumer involvement in practice throughout the flagship.
So, thank you, Viv. So, consumer and community involvement in practice, what have we done? Our committee is involved earlier in the development of research projects, some even at the idea stage, where we provide input on the project feasibility. We have consumers as research buddies on lab-based projects, as you would have heard Nick and Anna this morning. Members of our committee are associate investigators on some grants, with plans for chief investigators in the future. In the governance structure for the flagship, 2 of our members are on the steering committee, and also we have a consumer on the scientific advisory committee, and our ideas and input are well respected throughout the leadership group. And lastly, committee members participate in interviews and filming in development of additional massive open online courses, and Alice and Laura will be speaking about that this afternoon. So we're also involved in the MS Research Flagship Strategy Day. We meet annually with the MS Flagship Committee and researchers to look at past achievements and plan for the next year and sustainability of the flagship. We also participate in an early and mid-career researcher symposium where we award a Consumer Choice Award for the best plain English, plain language presentation. We are part of a team who works towards finding the answers and ultimately a cure for multiple sclerosis. We asked researchers what their thoughts were on our input, and we received some comments back from them. And I'm just going to pull a few snippets out from each one any minute. Okay, they're from Dr. Bennett McCormick. Oh, here it is, here, sorry. Their feedback was really helpful in highlighting which aspects of the work are most important to the MS community, often aspects I hadn't thought of myself. And Dr. Nicholas Blackburn, with his MS family study, Anna really gives me the lived perspective of a person with MS. Our chats have transformed how I think about the day-to-day life with MS. And Dr. Susie Claflin, the Consumer and Community Committee have been absolutely essential to the success of the Understanding MS massive open online course, and it's what's made the MOOC possible. And Dr. Alice Huglow, consumers have helped me understand how to be a better scientist, how to make our research more accessible, how to use a language that is positive and empowering for all. And you'll hear from Alice, I think, and Annie and Ingrid this afternoon. And Dr. Annie Brennan, their contributions have been incredibly valuable, from advice on broad project direction down to designing the exact colours and shape of the app's buttons. And then Dr. Laura Lazart, they asked me a lot of questions, which we do, most of it on things I wouldn't have expected. Some questions I could answer, but for others, I needed to go away and source extra information. The input I received from the Consumer Committee made my existing project idea better, and they gave me fresh ideas for new research questions.
So consumer involvement, just a couple of key points here that the Medical Research Future Fund, this statement comes from then, saying that consumers are the ultimate funders, users and benefactors of the research, and they have a right to be involved. I'd just like to point out that the members of the Consumer and Community Reference Committee throughout 2022 in the flagship, they contributed over 320 hours of involvement across 14 different research projects with the flagship, and I reckon 2023 is going to exceed that. I would like to acknowledge the members of the Consumer and Community Reference Committee. I won't read them out, but there they are, there for you to all see who those lovely people are. Acknowledge the funding from the Medical Research Futures Fund. And I really hope, apart from me struggling with this clicker, that we have demonstrated, or scientifically proven, as researchers like to say, that consumer and community involvement is an essential ingredient and it is not just the icing on the cake. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.